Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. Just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers fell 117 to 114 to drop to 16 and 13 on the season. They were swept in the season series by the Detroit Pistons. Another loss to the Pistons, who have proven to be a pesky thorn in the side of the Lakers this season, and I think have exposed some of the Lakers' flaws, particularly with the roster and just the makeup of this group. We will touch on all of that. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. As always, those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Just as a heads up, I'll be going about an hour tonight. I still have some writing and work to do. It is about to be Christmas Eve here in Los Angeles. So do want to get some quality time in with the family. So we'll be going a little bit shorter with the stream. No hour and a half, 2 hours tonight. But I promise I will get you guys back soon with another long Q&A. So with all that said, let's get into the 3 takeaways from the game. The first takeaway is one that I have not used in a while, but I'm going to use the word, and it is unserious. This was a game of unserious basketball by the Lakers, and I start with 20 turnovers for the Lakers, which is far too many. It is now the 3rd time in over the past 5 games that the Lakers have had 20 or more turnovers, which is just too many. It's just too many, especially with the nature of their turnovers tonight. Some unforced turnovers of guys passing the ball to the Pistons, like just simple misreading a passing lane. 80 dribbled the ball off of his foot a couple times. Austin got pickpocketed, dribbling the ball up the court a couple times. Just unserious, undisciplined basketball by the Lakers offensively. And it really undermined, like, I'm going to touch on it with my 3rd takeaway, but like, there was actually some positive things to take away from the offense tonight, like 114 points. I thought they were scoring at a higher rate than they had been over the last couple weeks. Shot 54% overall, shot 47% on threes, made 14 threes, got to the free throw line 25 times, made 80% of them. But that was all undone by them getting dominated in the possession battle. Detroit took 18 more shots than the Lakers when all was said and done. And Detroit only turned the ball over 12 times. And it was a significant difference of LA allowing 28 points off of their 20 turnovers to Detroit allowing just 9 off of their 12 turnovers. So aside from just the possession battle, that's a 19-point swing in terms of points off of turnovers. And it felt like anytime the Lakers made a mistake, turned the ball over, Detroit would find a way to capitalize. So I think of Cam Reddish throws an outlet pass that I believe it was Malik Beasley intercepts, hits a pull-up 3, or not even really like a step into 3 in transition. And there were countless other times like that was just one of the more visceral ones in my opinion. But like, it was just really bad. And the tough thing with this is turnovers have actually not been an issue for the Lakers this season. They've been one of the best teams in the league in terms of taking care of the ball. Like, but we do see they will have the occasional game or just stretches within a game where they become a high turnover team at an inopportune time. And that was really the case during some pivotal stretches of this game. So I mentioned the turnovers, points off turnovers. I would even say the free throws, like they did shoot 80% overall, but AD missed 4 free throws. And it just felt like those were some big free throw misses and just misses that really cost the Lakers. It just felt like they were timely misses. And it almost like, I wonder with him, with the just kind of the lull he's been in offensively, it almost felt like he wasn't as aggressive tonight. And we spoke with him after the game. We didn't really get into the free throws and sort of his offensive assertiveness, but I think it's basic human nature that if you are not making your free throws and you're kind of in this lull that AD's been in for several games from an offensive perspective, you might not be as aggressive. And only 14 shots tonight for AD. So I think there was just a lot there. And then I also look at the points in the paint difference of Detroit had 64 points in the paint. The Lakers had 40. That's a plus 24 advantage for Detroit in the paint. And we know that this is a Lakers team that lives in the paint. And maybe you could say that some of their opportunities were going to be a little bit lower because they did get to the free throw line more than Detroit. They had a 13 free throw advantage in terms of attempts. So overall, that could certainly swing things, but really that's probably like 6 to 8 possessions. And if you look at the paint attempts, Detroit had 55 paint attempts. The Lakers had 31. So that's a 24 more attempts in the paint for Detroit. And they were just more physical. Like you can see the difference between these two teams. And I look at another thing of JJ's talked about recently challenging the team to foul more. Like he talked about after the Miami game, he challenged the group to go out, someone go out and get 3 fouls this half, and no one could do it. And tonight, looking at it, the Lakers had 10 fouls, the Pistons had 20. And certainly part of that is style of play in LA, getting downhill and getting to the rim and drawing fouls, especially with LeBron and AD. But part of it is just a physicality thing. And LA did not match Detroit's physicality. In general, I think LA is a group that struggles with physicality. And then you factor in Detroit is a young team, they're athletic, and they hit on, I think, a lot of the Lakers' weaknesses from a personnel perspective and really from a roster perspective. So I think Detroit deserves a lot of credit. Like, this is a group that entered tonight 12-17. They're a below 500 team, but they've kicked the Lakers' ass now for 2 games this season. And this wasn't as decisive as the first game in Detroit on November 4th when the Lakers lost 115-113. But that was a game that, until the stretch against Denver and Phoenix and Miami and Minnesota and like that really rough stretch of play for LA, the one game that this group would constantly reference was the Detroit game, and not being as mentally locked in and prepared and just not taking them as seriously as they should have, and not being ready for the way that they were going to defend them and just the physicality and all that stuff. And I think it was better tonight, but there still was a clear gap between these two teams in terms of transition, getting downhill, Detroit pressuring them full court, playing passing lanes. And it just at times looked like two teams playing a different sport. And that, I think this hit on a lot of the weaknesses for the Lakers and weaknesses that when they play teams like OKC, Boston, Denver, Houston, even Memphis to a lesser extent, because they've seemed to kind of just mentally figure out Memphis a bit. Like, the teams that play with a certain level of physicality or athleticism, get out in transition, are good on both sides of the ball, at least in this, in a matchup against the Lakers. Those types of teams can really give them trouble. Like Minnesota's another one that I think you could throw in there, despite some of their recent struggles. So Detroit just kicked the Lakers' ass. Like, there's really no other way to frame it. No point in mincing words. They were the more physical team. They were the more aggressive team. They were the more assertive team. They physically dominated the Lakers. And it didn't help that the Lakers didn't play Christian Coloco or Armel Traore. JJ Redick said that he liked the way that some of the small ball Rui/LeBron at the 5 lineups looked. But then he said they didn't look great tonight. So, I think that's maybe something that he wishes he could go back on and try Christian, especially because the Pistons bench was what swung this game. If you look at it from a plus minus perspective, 4 of their 5 starters had double digit negative plus minuses outside of Jaden Ivey. It was the bench of Malik Beasley. Paul Reed was great tonight. He to me was the unsung hero. He had 3 steals, 2 blocks. He was a defensive monster tonight. Paul Reed. He really checked AD really well. But Fontecchio, Ron Holland was also a beast and was picking up guys full court and attacking. Like, I'm surprised he only played 13 minutes, but Detroit just kicked the Lakers' ass. Like, I mean, maybe that should be the takeaway. But I think for me, this was a loss and a team that LA had sort of referenced multiple times throughout the season, not just JJ, but multiple players. And it didn't feel like they met this game with the requisite focus and seriousness. And this really just plays into this group's inconsistency this season of, like, they win 4 or 5 and it looks like they're turning a corner and the offense is struggling, but the defense is at a certain level. And then I think tonight was a major regression from a defensive perspective of giving up 117 points, only having 8 steals, 3 blocks combined, 11 stocks compared to 17 for Detroit. Detroit shot 51%, 12 for 12 at the free throw line, although obviously Lakers aren't playing defense on free throws, but 10 offensive rebounds for Detroit as well. Yeah, I mean, I think overall for me, this was a rather unserious performance by the Lakers, and certainly a disappointment. Like, it's one thing if Detroit, and certainly like Malik Beasley got hot, he made 5 threes. There were Tim Hardaway hit a couple threes. Like, there were times where I thought the Lakers defended well, and Detroit just made some tough shots. And if it's one of those nights, that's one thing. But this was not one of those nights. This was LA not taking care of the ball, throwing wild passes, throwing jump passes, dribbling the ball off their foot, trying to get fouls that weren't being called. And again, Detroit really dictated the pace and the physicality, and they set the tone, and LA couldn't match it. And I think this is a blueprint game of, if you want to beat the Lakers, go back and watch this film, and this is a way to beat them. Looking at the turnovers again, like Austin, this was a really rough Austin game. I think he was picked on defensively by Detroit, and he also had 6 turnovers compared to just 2 assists. Did have 7 rebounds, and I thought, like, tried to make up for his turnovers in other ways, and technically had the best plus minus on the team at plus 16, but still, I mean, he got pickpocketed a couple times, and really he was one of the guys who was throwing the ball into passing lanes, and that the Pistons were aggressively playing, and he really struggled with their ball pressure and athleticism on the perimeter. But I mentioned AD, he had a couple times he dribbled the ball off his foot, and D'Lo only played less than 16 minutes, had a couple turnovers, 1 for 5 shooting. This is the type of game where D'Lo has tended to struggle. Gabe, I thought shot well, but also had a couple turnovers. So, like, LA, I mean, really top down. Most of the group struggled with the ball pressure, and again, 20 turnovers is too much. 28 points allowed off of turnovers, too much. 10 offensive rebounds, too much. Missed too many free throws, and allowed too many points in the paint. So I think that right there is that's the game in my estimation. Takeaway number 2 is, to me, this game exposed and confirmed some of the clear roster needs. So one, LA needs to get quicker and more athletic, and it's something that I've talked about a bit, and it almost feels like it's been a little bit of a lesser concern, because clearly the backup 5 has been a big issue for them, with Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood out, and even Jared Vanderbilt. JJ's talked about potentially using him as a 5 in certain bench lineups. So that's been an issue. then clearly like the big wings that they just don't have on this team, partly because Vando's out, but even if with Vando in, they need more two-way wings in like the 6'7" to 6'9" range. They're asking a lot of LeBron, of Rui. Defensively, Cam offensively fluctuates night to night. Tonight was a good night. He went 3 for 3, but the last game against Sacramento, he goes 2 for 7. So like Cam's performances can vacillate. Max is a little bit on the smaller side, and I thought Cade was able to target him a bit. I didn't love the matchups, but this was a tough matchup for LA from a like looking at the starters. They often went with Rui chasing Tim Hardaway Jr. That's a mismatch. Rui, like he's just too quick and too good at slithering around screens for Rui. LeBron was on Tobias Harris, AD on Jalen Duren, but then you had Austin on Ivy and Max on Cade Cunningham, and that's just a tough. Like Cade Cunningham's a beast, and he did have an inefficient night, and I do want to give credit to Max and to Cam for slowing him down a bit, but still, I mean, 25 and 10 for Cade, and there's just too many times he was able to bump those guys, create space, and get good looks or attract a crowd and then spray out to teammates. So I think I would have preferred. I mean, I don't know if you go Rui on Cade and then just switch depending on who he's screening with. They didn't have a great matchup for Cade, to be honest, and that's where they could use that bigger wing type. But I would have preferred, I think, Max on Jaden Ivey, and we've seen him envelop those type of smaller. I mean, Jaden Ivey's got some size, but compared to Max, he's not as big as Max. And then put Austin on Tim Hardaway Jr., have him chase and slither around screens, and I think that's a better matchup for him. And then I guess LeBron on Tobias and AD on Duren. And then they went to a lot of Cunningham. They're actually targeting AD a lot, which I found interesting. But if you're going to a Cunningham Duren pick and roll, maybe you can just switch AD onto Cunningham, and then Rui's battling Duren, which Duren did kill them the last game, and I thought they did a better job of keeping him off the offensive glass. He only had 3 offensive rebounds, but I don't know. It was certainly a tough matchup. Like Cade and Ivy as a backcourt present a lot of problems for the Lakers. But I think looking at it, like again, I felt there's too many times that it just felt like these two teams were playing different sports. Lakers did not, like I haven't even mentioned Asar Thompson, who's like basically an evolved Cam Reddish. He's a better version, like he's what Cam was supposed to be, and he's pressuring full court and wreaking havoc, getting out in transition. I thought Ron Holland again came in, was a defensive playmaker. So they just have a lot of size and athleticism and speed and physicality. And compared to the Lakers, they made the Lakers look geriatric tonight. And really, like outside of LeBron and AD, everyone else on this group is under 30. So it's not like the Lakers they're not that old, right? But from a physicality and speed and athleticism perspective, they just can't match up with this team. So that's one clear roster need that like we've seen it in certain matchups. I think we saw it in the OKC game. I think we've seen it in some of the Minnesota games. I thought the first Detroit game, the first Cleveland game, and there's certainly been games where LA's perimeter lack of athleticism has really been exposed, and I think that's a real clear need coming out of this game for them as they try to address and improve the team on the trade market. And then the other thing is, like I mentioned, them getting slaughtered in the bench minutes, particularly with the small ball stuff. They need another center, and we asked pregame about Christian Wood, about Jackson Hayes. We were told there's no updates on those guys. So TBD, I guess probably going into January without either one of those guys back. Vando's out at least until early January. So reinforcements are not coming. Like LA is just going to be without half of their front court. And I think it's getting to the point where they have to do something. Like Christian Coloco has had some flashes, but he clearly has not earned the full trust of JJ Redick. And I think it's costing them, where there's games Christian plays in the first half, doesn't play in the second half. There's games like tonight where he doesn't play at all. And they need a backup five who can play 15 minutes and just hold down the fort. And they don't have that right now. And it's partly due to injury, but I would also argue partly due to roster construction. Vando and Wood were injured before the season started, coming off season surgeries. Like they could have addressed this and they chose not to. So I think at some point that's got to fall on the front office and the team to actually do something about this, because this is a game where you have a Christian Wood or a Jackson Hayes. I think the Lakers potentially win this game. And that's to say nothing of a Walker Kessler, a Robert Williams, or even a Jonas Valanciunas, Jakob Poeltl, whatever. Just having another 7-footer who could take up space and be a big body in the paint. I think that's like kind of a basic thing that they just don't have right now. And then third and final thing was I did want to note some of the offensive improvement. And I thought from a process perspective that there was some progress. And of course it's like they had 20 turnovers. So I want to be, but I do want to acknowledge, like, when they were actually able to take care of the ball and get into their offense, again, 54% shooting, 47% on threes, 14 threes made. JJ talked pregame about trying to get this group to take more threes. They didn't. They only took 30, but at least I thought they were generating some good looks, and the shot quality was good. 25 free throw attempts is a sign of, like, that's a pretty good number. That's above their season average. So that's a sign they're getting downhill. They're drawing fouls. They're getting Detroit into the bonus. I would also argue that's partly due to Detroit's physicality and style of defense, that they were fouling a lot, but it worked, right? And so I do want to note, like, I thought LeBron, this was one of his best offensive games. 28, 11, and 11, his 8th triple-double of the season. Only 2 turnovers for LeBron. So 11 assists to 2 turnovers. That's obviously elite. 10 for 16 shooting. Hit a couple threes, 6 for 7 on free throws. 80, I thought, was better than the Sacramento games. 19 and 6. 6 as in assists. But again, the turnovers, missed free throws. Max had, I believe, his career high with 17, 6 of 10 shooting, hit 3 threes. They were leaving Max wide open, and he made them pay. Rui was pretty MIA in the paint, 1 rebound in 29 minutes. And then the bench was pretty rough, but Gabe hit 3 threes. Dalton finally showed some life, and he hit a 3, his first 3 since December 6th. So it was almost over 2.5 weeks since Dalton last hit a 3. Cam went 3 for 3. Then D'Lo went just 1 for 5. He did go back to the locker room early fourth. They said that he was getting something checked out with his hand, but they didn't say he was ruled out. So seems like this was just not a great matchup for him, and JJ benched him. Did have 5 assists though, so was third on the team in assists. So that I just wanted to kind of hit on, like, I think when they were actually able to run their offense and get it set, there was some progress, at least compared to how the last couple weeks looked. The issue was they were not able to get into their offense as frequently as they should have been able to. And if we see that 18 field goal attempt difference get cut to 12 field goal attempts or 9 field goal attempts, I think the Lakers win this game with the way that they were scoring the ball. It just, they didn't give themselves enough opportunities. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. I see we got a couple of super chats. First one from Lakers Sean. Addition by subtraction. I think LBJ and AD getting younger athletes would infuse energy like after the Russ trade. Well, thank you for the super chat, Sean. And I agree. I think that we have a formula for the Lakers. It is the 2019-20 team put a bunch of athletic, energetic, defensive-minded role players around AD and LeBron, and you win a championship. The next season, you tilted a little bit more offensively, but you still have KCP, Kuzma, Keefe, Caruso. You still have a lot of that foundation, and you do change the center composition with Gasol, Trez, and Drummond versus McGee and Dwight, and Schroeder instead of Danny Green. But overall, you still have a lot of that foundation of like two-way talent and some of the key pieces that fit around LeBron and AD during the bubble run. Then you go away from it and you go to use, I guess, the word of the show, geriatric, and you go with Wade Ellington and Trevor Ariza and Dwight Howard for a third time, and DeAndre Jordan, and Russ obviously was the big acquisition. Then you kind of reload with Pat Bev and whatever, but then you go and remake the team. And while that group was certainly more offensive minded with guys like Austin and D'Lo and Rui, you had Vando playing a pivotal role. The backup five spot was a little shaky, so it was still a lot on AD, and they sometimes played small during that stretch. But you had Dennis providing a certain spark with his defense. I think Austin was a bit more engaged and defending at a higher level at that point. And then you still had Vando in there as that wing, all-purpose wing defender who could defend multiple positions. So I think we've seen that there is a blueprint of what works around LeBron and AD. And even now, I think inserting Max, like when the Lakers have looked at their best, it was like when Cam was playing well earlier in the season and he provides a jolt and gets into the starting lineup. And then it's now with Max, and obviously not tonight, but in general, they've looked better with Max as a starter. This was their first loss with Max as a starter. And like the starting lineup has, even tonight, 3 of the 5 starters had positive plus minuses. LeBron was a -1, so he was right there, nearly neutral. Rui was a -5. So like the starting lineup, I'm sure, I don't know it off the top of my head. I would assume it had a positive plus minus tonight, or pretty close. So the starters together have worked. It's just been very inconsistent group overall. But to your point, like, yeah, I think if you add some youth, some athleticism, some energy to this group, and that's how you fill out the rest of the rotation and the roster. Obviously, you need skill. You need shooting. You need a certain level of playmaking and shot creation. So I'm not advising the Lakers to go like all just raw athlete and say screw scoring and shooting and skill. Like you need a balance there. But certainly they could use an infusion of length and athleticism and physicality. And I think that's like 1 to 2 more players into the rotation, swapping out 1 to 2 more players that aren't necessarily providing that. And if you make that swap, you get Vando back, all of a sudden this is a group that I think starts to make a lot more sense from a two-way balance, and like just like the role players fitting around LeBron and AD. Super chat from Anarx. Thank you for the super chat. Unrelated to the game, but do you hoop? If so, who is your most accurate NBA player comparison? So I used to hoop. I hooped all through high school and into college, just recreationally, post high school, and then into playing in adult leagues and stuff. But I did tear my Achilles last year, actually on my 31st birthday. So it's been about 14 months since I tore it. So I no longer play. I might make a return at some point, but for now I'm retired. It was not recommended to tear your Achilles. But I've talked about this a little bit before, but like I was more of a defensive stopper, like tough, hard-nosed foul guy. Like they'd put me on a star and just be like, go lock this player up. And if you got to give him an elbow or flagrant foul and whatever, like I got ejected from multiple games. I know you guys can't tell that necessarily by my chill disposition, but I do have a temper when I play. So I've compared myself, I guess, to like an Andrew Bogut, where I was a bit of a shot blocker, like Andrew Bogut with the Warriors, where more of like a defensive anchor, block shots, tough fouls, rebound, facilitate around the elbows. I would say I had more of a jumper than Andrew Bogut. I could stretch it out to long twos or eventually threes. And I had a hook shot, but not, I would say more of a low volume offensive player, was much more of a screener facilitator, and then defensively blocking shots and clobbering people. Another super chat from Andre Miller. Shaq equals rings. Gasol Bynum equals rings. AD Dwight JaVale equals rings. This isn't complicated. Kareem equals rings. I see a pattern, Lakerland. Yeah, I mean, I think the Lakers are partly there with, they already have AD, right? And he's at his best, probably the second best big man in the league, second or third, I guess, depending on how you want to quantify or qualify, excuse me. Giannis, I guess Giannis is almost like his own. He's kind of like a weird wing big hybrid. I guess he's more of a big than a wing, but third behind Jokic and Giannis, I would say. I would put him comfortably above Embiid with Embiid's health and all the stuff going on this season. But they're right there with that. But to your point, they don't have like Shaq could kind of do it on his own. I mean, he had Horace Grant and Robert Horry, though those guys weren't at, and Gasol and Bynum also had Odom, then AD Dwight JaVale, but I would even throw it out like that. LeBron, Kuzma, Markieff Morris, like they had a versatility with the front court where they could go big, they could go small. That there was a lot of flexibility there, and certainly this group doesn't have a lot of size. I mean, the starting front court has size, but right now they don't have a lot of size coming off the bench. And in general, I would say they don't. I think they need better size and more expensive size, because I don't think having two vet minimum backup fives is the move here. And that's where I think they got to upgrade the roster. So I'm with you. I still don't know if I would put that as the most important need. I think having a player, and maybe it's a healthy Vando, though I think it comes with offensive complications. Like having a guy who could guard a Cade, or a guy who could guard a Jason Tatum, or a Shea, or like a Kevin Durant, like kind of that primary big scorer who's between like 6'6" and 6'9". I know KD is technically bigger, but like that alpha scorer, a Luka, right? And Vando can check some of those guys, but I do think he comes with certain offensive limitations. I think ideally for the Lakers, you have a starter who could check those guys, and then Vando comes off the bench and plays 15, 18, maybe 20 minutes, depending on the matchup, depending on how he's fitting in offensively. So I think they still need that guy first and foremost, but I'm with you that the center spot, especially like backup five spot, needs to be improved upon. Michael D, 267 watching, 24 likes. Yeah, let's get those likes up. Thank you, Michael. Adam Hurley, what's the word on wood? No word on wood, and that's a bit of a problem. Thank Charlie. The fact is, Jovan, the big man thing is probably easier to get compared to a 3-and-D wing. You are correct. So, but I think they need both. So, and that's I guess maybe like when I've been asked what's my ideal outcome, I say Walker Kessler and Cam Johnson. So I think they need both. And even like or Dorian Finney-Smith, Bruce Brown, someone like that to upgrade the perimeter defense. In Cam's case, it's more of upgrading the shooting, and just from like a raw talent perspective, I think he's probably the best, or one of the best perimeter guys right now available. But you're right, like, and that's where I think they need to do both, and it is going to be less expensive for the most part. unless it's Walker Kessler. In almost any other scenario, it's going to be cheaper to go get a big man. And there are several quality bigs who are not going to cost the first. And if they could go get one of those guys, I think that needs to, I would say it's the more urgent one, where I think ideally they can go get a big within the next couple weeks and try and plug that hole, and then maybe be a little bit more patient with the 3-and-D wing search. And a guy like Bruce Brown coming off knee injury, knee surgery before the season, maybe you want to see what he looks like and get him back and kind of into a certain rhythm before pulling the trigger on that. But you're right. Like it's certainly easier to find a big than it is a 3-and-D wing. That's also why I think they probably should have done it over the summer, but I digress. Pieter K, we lost by 3, chill. I would push back that I felt like the Lakers made a little bit of a fake comeback at the end. Like to be honest, if they had pulled off the comeback and there was a couple, like LeBron had a finish where he got hit in the head. AD had a finish where he was they called a foul. He was about to go to the free throw line. Detroit challenged it. Then it was overturned. Like there were, or maybe LeBron hits the 3 at the end. I didn't even mention that. LeBron got a look at the end, missed it to tie the game. Even if LA had won this game, to be honest, I would have still basically reacted the same way, because they were down by basically double digits or close to double digits for most of the fourth quarter. Detroit went on a 9-4 run to open the fourth and basically controlled the game from there. And they had been controlling parts of the game earlier, but like I hear you. You are technically correct in that, like, this was a 3-point loss, but I think there were some troubling trends, particularly the turnovers, which have been on the rise now. The offense has been in the tank for almost a month, and the turnovers have been on the rise. 3 of the last 5 games, 20 plus turnovers. AD's not looked like himself offensively, and they're not getting him as involved as frequently. And I personally, again, would just double down on, like, I think Detroit kicked their ass tonight from like a physicality perspective. And I think the talent gap between these two teams is what kept this relatively close and what gave LA enough of a shot. And again, like I said earlier, I thought the offense, there were some good things when they were able to execute and not turn the ball over in terms of field goal percentage, 3-point shot quality, getting to the free throw line. Like there were some positives. I just think this is like the Lakers should not have had 20 turnovers against this team. And to me, it continues to be these mental lapses and this inconsistency that this group has that is a bit troubling. And it looks like right when they're finally getting some momentum, they're playing more serious basketball, they have a night like tonight where I just feel like what was largely not serious. Dark Galaxy, typical Lakers with no updates. Yeah. We didn't ask about Vando, but Vando technically is still out, and he was set to be reevaluated in early January. So I think they would just, that's why there was no, it seems like Jackson and Christian are supposed to be returning sooner. Laker fan for life, Jovan. How do you think the Lakers would do in a playoff series versus Denver? Denver's struggling and not the same dominant team. I say we beat them in 5 games. It's tough because I go back to like last month's game, and I thought they had a solid first half, and then Denver just completely blitzed them, and the Lakers basically gave up in the second half of that game. And that was right after the Orlando game, and it felt like at that point they were going down like a mental landslide. I would say, I mean, look, the 4 games in the conference finals were all close. The 5 games last year were all close. And to your point, Jamal Murray has not been the same. MPJ, I think, has not been the same. And their bench is a mess. So, and they have Russ, who I think is going to especially if he's playing the Lakers in a playoff series, is going to be a little extra in that setting. So I'd give the like, if we're saying both, look, I think the Lakers have to be healthy. I don't think they're winning that series with the current health. I think they would need Christian and Jackson back. And I know Darvin was hesitant. Like Christian was out. He wasn't back yet. Vando was out. He wasn't back yet, even though both were technically cleared. Jackson, he didn't really trust in that series. And I don't think you should have Jackson guarding Jokic. But I think if you're telling me the Lakers are fully healthy and everyone's back, I do think they have a good shot to beat Denver. Now, the X factor here for me is like the psychological edge of it feels like Denver shoots better against the Lakers. Like they just get up more for those matchups. And when Denver starts to make shots and go on a run, the Lakers get a little tight. And I think that's clearly been an issue. And like basically every game has had some stretch where Denver goes on a run and the Lakers can't withstand it. So I think it's probably a 7-game series, and then it might come down to home court. But I think if you told me the Lakers won in 6 or 7, I wouldn't be surprised. So I do think it's certainly closer. And Narks, Cam Johnson would thrive with us. I agree. Super chat from Michael D. Of the games I've watched, tonight was the worst the backcourt looked in terms of handling ball pressure and physicality this season. I agree. And you guys know I've been a Austin defender, especially when it, I feel like anytime we talk about him, that's like a polarizing thing. But tonight was a rough Austin. Like there's really no defending. Like 5 for 9. I thought when he was able to create for himself, like he got some good looks. And again, I thought the 7 rebounds were, he still finds a way, even when he's having like an offensive performance to kind of contribute. But 6 turnovers was far too many. He almost had a third of the Lakers turnovers, and a couple of those were in the backcourt. And he was one of the guys who really struggled. But, to your point, Max had a turnover, D'Lo had 2, Cam had 1, Gabe had 1. They all struggled to varying degrees with the ball pressure, 94 feet, picking up at half court, cheating into passing lanes. And LA did a really poor job of handling that. And it certainly got better, I guess, in later in the fourth. But I thought at that point, Detroit looked like a young team, which they are, and they were trying to play. They were trying not to lose rather than playing to win. And they started taking some bad shots, stopped getting to the rim as much. And you give the Lakers certainly some credit, but I also thought Detroit was like kind of choking the game away a little bit late. And just ultimately the Lakers couldn't make enough shots and kind of ran out of time. Jay Hoodie, if Gabe keeps playing like he is now, do you trade him? It's a really good question. It's something I've been thinking a lot about. I think we're getting to the point where I'm okay with trading Gabe. I mean, sorry, let me rewind. I'm okay with keeping Gabe. And I think the Lakers are more open to the possibility of keeping Gabe. The one issue is if you just look at the salary that has to be traded, if they're going to make any trades of consequence, and I think this group still probably needs 2 separate trades. It's D'Lo at 18.7. It's Gabe at 11. It's Vando, who's currently out and has missed almost 2 seasons now combined, or collectively, with 3 more years left on his deal at around 11. And then it's Rui at 17, but that's a guy that LA is, clearly they're starting him, they're playing him a certain amount. They consider him part of the core, young group with Austin and Dalton and Max. I think he's not quite fully in that inner circle with those 3 of guys they really would like to keep and continue to build with, but he's closer to that than D'Lo, Gabe, or Vando is. And Vando, I think at this point, just with the uncertainty with his health and how many more years he still has, like, I think they're probably going to try and move the D'Lo. Like, I think if anything, Gabe playing like this means D'Lo is probably more likely to be traded among the two. But if they have to trade a second mid-sized contract, I don't think it's going to be Max. I think Vando is going to be tough to move. And then it comes down to like Rui versus Gabe. And I think the team is going to look at it and be like, we'd rather keep the player who's younger, who we like more, and who's bigger. And that's, but I do think there's a possibility that depending on how this, like I will say, like I've not been the biggest Valanciunas guy, and I'm potentially going to contradict myself with talking about the need to go get a backup five. But I think if you're the Lakers, like Gabe for Valanciunas is looking like more of a mistake than it was when Gabe wasn't playing as well. Now that he's playing like this, I think it's tough to give up that guy for Valanciunas personally. At the same time, they do need a backup five. It's a big need. So that they're kind of in a pickle with that situation, but they don't have these other, like, they don't have like crappy players really on these like mid-sized contracts. Like if anything, you could have said Gabe was maybe the exception, but he's been playing fairly well now for several weeks. So I would still trade him for the right player, but I think that the bar should be a little bit higher, and it shouldn't just be like dump Gabe, just throw him in the way it was maybe like 2-3 weeks ago. Question from Steez. Would you do Rui, JHS, and 3 second-round picks for Bruce Brown? I would have to see him be healthy first and look more like himself. The Lakers only have 5 second-round picks, so I'd fight to make that like 2. But I don't know. I would prefer to put D'Lo in this trade rather than Rui. And I would guess that Toronto would rather do that as well because of D'Lo's expiring contract. And Bruce Brown is a guy who played point guard, was the backup point guard in Denver. Obviously hasn't played that position as much since then, but like he does have some ball handling, playmaking chops. So I'd prefer D'Lo rather than Rui, but I do like Bruce Brown, and I know the Lakers like Bruce Brown. They thought they were going to get him before he went to Indiana. Super chat from Eeg. Jonas has to be smoked. No, I feel like if they wanted him, they'd have him by now. I'm kind of liking stealth mode Pelinka. Also, Kuz ship sailed. Please no. I've been saying that as more time has passed, it's felt like the Jonas situation is a bit of a smokescreen. Like LA, it's now officially Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas Eve to those who celebrate. But Lakers could have had Valanciunas 9 days ago, and really based on how the Thomas Bryant and Dennis Schroeder trades played out, they could have agreed to it 24, 48, even 72 hours in advance for that trade to go through on that Sunday. So the fact that they haven't, that is making me feel like with each passing day, it's probably less likely that Valanciunas ends up a Laker. And that's fine with in my opinion, because I think he's too defensively limited from a mobility perspective and can be a guy that's targeted and exposed. But yeah, I mean, I think right now it seems like stealth mode is the way the Lakers are operating. It's just, I think for fans, of course, stealth mode is good, but I think you want to make sure it's not like stealth mode leading to inactivity. It more so stealth mode that leads to something no one sees coming. L.A. Jovan, I feel like Time Lord is the ideal big for them. Rim protecting athlete who could defend on the ball, but I don't trust his health. Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, if you could get Robert Williams for not a first round pick, if that's a guy that's 2 or 3 second round picks, I think I would just roll the dice and go get him. That probably costs you Gabe and JHS, Gabe and Christian Wood, some type of Gabe plus like a Gabe and Maxwell Lewis, some type of Gabe and minimum-ish salary. If you could get him without giving up a first, I do it in a heartbeat. If the price is a first, I'm a little hesitant just because of the health. At the same time, you are kind of in an 18-month window here with LeBron and AD. So maybe it's not as much of a concern in like kind of a shorter term window. That this is where Walker Kessler, to me, like he doesn't have the same injury concerns. I think like he's not the athlete that Robert Williams is, but a better rebounder, right there in terms of shot blocking, and I think provides a little bit more stability. Is a little bit younger and still on his rookie deal. Robert Williams is making about like I think 14 million or so. But that said, Robert Williams I think is more of like an imposing physical athlete, where if you have him next to AD or even just as the backup five, that's a dude who's gonna like swat a shot into the seventh row, and it's gonna be like teams are gonna think twice about it. And just having that tandem of LeBron, of Time Lord and AD back there, and even LeBron playing more LeBron at the three, like just having that size on the front court, I think would go a long way. So for me, it really comes down to second round picks versus first round picks. If I'll say if the Lakers exhaust their options and like Miles Turner doesn't become available, or Walker Kessler, that they're really holding strong on like we want 2 first round picks for Walker Kessler, and it's just something kind of ridiculous, I would consider Robert Williams for a first. I would fight to protect that if I'm the Lakers. I don't think I'd give them an unprotected for Robert Williams, but again, if it's a couple seconds, even up to 3, I would personally do that in a heartbeat. Okay, catching up with the chat. Randiculous, Drew, thank you for the super chat, and thank you for calling out the aggregation. Do you realize every time you podcast, Bleacher Report writers aggregate 2 to 3 articles out of these Q&As? What a joke publication. P.S. D. Fox as a 2025 free agent. The Lakers are not going to have the cap flexibility to get De'Aaron Fox. That would require, I don't even know if it would be possible if they tore the roster down to the studs with LeBron and AD. I think it would have to be LeBron retiring and then also tearing things down to create the cap space. So that's unlikely. Yeah, I've talked about it on here before. The one that I think I've touched on once, it wasn't Bleacher Report, but it was I want to say Basketball Forever or something like that. One of those, that they all have kind of similar names, but they said that I said that Kuzma and Lonzo are coming back to the Lakers, which I never said. And I reported on Kuzma as a name that's been linked to them. I did not report on Lonzo, and I said linked to them. I didn't say they're trading for him or for them, or like, so yeah, the aggregation cycle on the one hand, it gets me more views and clicks. And like, there are certainly positive things to it. And look, everyone's got a job to do. So if you are an aggregator, I get it. You make your money on X or whatever, but I just ask, like, do it with the context of what I'm saying. Don't make it clickbait. Don't lie, for sure. But yeah, I'm with you. In general, the aggregation thing is pretty frustrating. Super chat from Keon Park. Is D'Lo fine? If he hurt his hand, then harder to win games. Also, can the Lakers still do injured D'Lo trade? Lakers made it sound like it was not serious, and it sounded like he could return to the game. He just went back to the locker room early in the fourth. We'll monitor the injury report. Lakers will have an injury update or injury report coming out tomorrow ahead of the Christmas game against the Warriors. So we'll track that, see what they say about D'Lo, and if he's going to be questionable or out or whatever. I would assume maybe he's listed on it, but it's probably like probable or something. But they didn't clarify. They just said it was a hand thing. They didn't clarify if it was a finger, if it was, like what, like the palm or like a tendon on the hand. Like I don't know what it was. So Lakers did not have an update on that. And as long as he's not like seriously injured, they can still trade him. And even then, I think most people are going to be looking at D'Lo's contract as just the expiring value of if they can get off longer term money, or it's like a Brooklyn situation where they're trying to tank and they want to trade their best players. I think that's more of D'Lo's value right now in terms of going somewhere. And look, if he's injured, like there might even be teams that prefer him be injured because then they can really tank. So I don't think that really changes his value. Super chat from Eeg. Thank you for the super chat. Percent chance to using 0, 1, or both of first. How would you chart it? Also, do you think Rui's fit is poor? In perfect world, add size, but offense not good enough to make up for inability to guard wings, chase shooters. Tough situation. I'll say with Rui, I think the ideal, you mentioned perfect world. The ideal world with Rui is him not being a 3. Like Rui is more of a 4 and he should be backing up LeBron. The problem is if you look at the Lakers roster, like they kind of have to play him at the 3. Like there's just a talent gap between Rui and Cam Reddish, or I've even said Rui and Dalton, especially with the way that Dalton defends. Like Dalton was targeted tonight again. I was kind of surprised that they kept him in as long as they did, but he did certainly break out of his slump a little bit, just 2 for 4, 1 for 2 on threes. But and then Cam, doesn't get guarded, really out there much at all. So Rui kind of has to start. Like the one guy that could push Rui in terms of starting would be Jared Vanderbilt, or going out and making a trade, which is what I've been advocating for, is go out and get a 3-and-D wing, move Rui to the bench, or potentially trade him depending on what those deals look like. But I think an ideal world is you go get, for the Lakers, you go get a Cam Johnson or a DFS and you move Rui to the bench, or maybe you go get both. And Rui's probably has to be in that trade, but I think Rui's probably better coming off of the bench in more of a backing up LeBron as like the backup 4. And there could still be matchups or nights where you go with Rui at the 3. He's feeling it. He's in a good rhythm. It's a matchup where he can't be as exploited as much on the perimeter. So then close with him or play him more minutes. But I think Rui, probably want to split Rui and LeBron up a little bit, because I do think there's some overlap there. Honestly, similar to Austin and D'Lo in terms of strengths and weaknesses. Of course, LeBron does many things at a much higher level than Rui, so I'm not trying to compare them in that way, but more so the defensive end. I think there's some overlap of like, you probably want to stagger those two defensively. As for the first part of your question, I'm going to do some quick math in my head and come up with a pie chart. 0, 1, or both. How would I chart it? I would probably chart it we're starting off at like 33.3 for each one. Okay, I'll go. I would say right now, the way I would chart it in my head would probably be 4. So I'll work from more picks to less. I would say about 20% both picks, which leaves you 80% for the other two. And then I would go 42% no picks, 38% one pick. So I think it's close, but I would lean, especially with some uncertainty of like how this group is going to look over the next couple of weeks and with some of the inconsistency, I think I would lean, and by no picks, I'm saying no first, right? So certainly there are other trades, like they could go trade for Valanciunas for a couple of seconds and they didn't give up a first, and like they technically made a trade, but that doesn't take away from the first cupboard. So I would say right now with how they've looked, because another whole thing with LA is like, I was looking this up before the game, but per cleaning the glass, they've won about 3.6 more games than expected, which you technically cannot win like a decimal of a game. But the point is, like, LA, based on their net differential, their point differential, they've actually been punching above their weight. They have the point differential and the net rating of a group that's below 500. So if anything, LA has had some favorable outcomes based on their schedule and based on their performance. Now I believe that like this group kind of has had that before. Like last year, they won 47 games, had the net rating of a 43 win team. Like, I think the Lakers just kind of tend to overachieve sometimes and have some close wins, have some bad losses. That's kind of the makeup of this group. So I don't really hold that against them. But my point is, that's kind of my loose pie right now. If I was making one, would be 42% 0 first round picks, 38% 1 first round pick, and then 20% 2 first round picks. So I guess depending on how you look at that, you can look at it negatively and be like, 42% no pick is the highest technical slice, but you could also then say 58% they do use at least one, if not both. So just depends how you want to look at that. All right, I see we got a couple more super chats here. I am hitting the 1 hour mark, so I think I will answer these and then I will wrap. Randiculous. D Fox to pair with AD long term with a LeBron clutch family pay cut as he does a farewell tour while possibly winning a chip. Technically doable. So you're saying trade for Fox, I would assume, because again, as I said, cap space situation, Lakers are not going to be a cap space player next summer. If De'Aaron Fox was able to force his way to LA, I mean, I don't even know what his contract is right now. Let me quickly pull up De'Aaron Fox's salary. 1 second. So he's making less than okay, so he's making about 35 million. He's got 37 on the books for next season. So 35, you could get there with D'Lo and Rui. You could get there with D'Lo, Gabe, and gets you about 29. I mean, Max, if that's a real big thing for Sacramento is getting Max back, I think the Lakers like have to consider that. I would fight to keep Max if I'm them. But you could also get there with JHS and Christian or something like that. I think it would have to be a scenario where De'Aaron Fox like demands out and says, I only want to go to the Lakers. And they strong arm the Kings into doing that. Otherwise, and then that probably, I mean, almost certainly requires both picks, might even be a couple pick swap. Like, I mean, De'Aaron Fox is a really good player. He's, I'd say, arguably a top 20 guy in the league, right? So, I mean, top 30 at worst. And then depending on how you view him, top 25, top 20, whatever. He's really, really good. So I think the price would be high. If it's a bidding war, other teams can outbid them. If it's a situation where it's kind of like 80 in New Orleans and the Lakers have an advantage, then they could obviously manipulate it into like what they want to give up. Do they consider us? Like, I don't know how that goes, but it's possible. He is making a salary that the Lakers could trade for. I just think there would have to be him and Clutch really strong arming the Kings into doing that. J.R. Mandrano, thank you for the super chat. I know people are on both sides of this player, but BI is really starting to be someone that is gaining on me, a true three, but also a perimeter creator. He is gaining on me too. I would say my one concern with BI is just the defensive end of he has slipped the last couple of years on the defensive end. And I think like there's just a question. I've mentioned the Jeremy Grant comparison, at least on the defensive end of like, can he get that back? Now I will say if you bring in BI, I think that there's some like him as a number 3, I really like compared to him as a number 1 or him as even a number 2. You also slot Austin down to the number 4. And I think that's probably a more appropriate role for Austin offensively. So if you're probably giving up D'Lo almost certainly to match salary. And now you're not replacing D'Lo's playmaking because BI is not the playmaker that D'Lo is, but he's still a better playmaker than like a Rui or a Cam or a Max. Certainly a better ball handler than those guys, and certainly a better shot creator. And I would even say a better shot creator and scorer than D'Lo is. So you're getting actually an upgrade in terms of the shot creation, the scoring. You're getting a big wing. I have a little bit of like, I would say my fear is like he's more closer to like, if we're looking at like a scale, he might be a little bit more on like the LeBron Rui side of the defensive end than like the Cam Vando side, Cam Vando Max. I think he's got the physical capability to be more on the Cam Vando Max side. And if you get that version of him, obviously that's a very valuable two-way player. So I've grown open to it. I would not give up both first round picks. I think at most I would give up one. Even then I would fight because of his contract situation to not give up a first. But if it ultimately came down to it, I think I would give up a first for BI. Then last one here from Golden. Thank you for the super chat. D'Lo, JHS 2029 first for DFS and Sharp. Thoughts? I would fight to make this a protected first. I would love this deal if you could get it. Like if you could do 3 seconds, I would do that in a heartbeat. You plug DFS in as the starting front court guy, move Rui to the bench. Day'Ron Sharp can be your backup 5. And now Gabe also gets a little bit of a bigger role offensively with D'Lo gone. So your starters are AD, LeBron, DFS, Max, and Austin. Your bench is Gabe, Dalton, Rui, Vando, and Sharp / Wood / Hayes. And you could still do another trade. You still have potentially a first or 2 firsts, depending on the ultimate price. If I'm giving up a first, I'd rather get Cam Johnson than DFS. And I think he's more worth it. I think DFS is more of a borderline first guy, but I also do like Sharp. So maybe Sharp tilts it from like 2 seconds for DFS into like first round territory. I would then though fight for that to be a protected first and have that convey into a second if it doesn't convey. I don't love an unprotected first for DFS, especially because he's like 33, 34, something. He's in his mid 30s almost. So I would be a little hesitant for that. But in general, I like the framework of this, and I think that's the type of deal that is realistic. And if they are willing to put the first, I think Brooklyn would certainly listen. But I've gone about 7 minutes over. I'm going to wrap here. Again, I got to get back to writing, and it is Christmas Eve, so I got to spend some time with the fam. But I appreciate you all so much for oh wait, all right, now, hold on. I see we got 2 super chats, so I will answer both of these quickly. Super chat from Keon Park, 35 to 36 million. BI, Fox, or DFS, and Cam Johnson, D'Lo, Gabe, and Vando, and a first. And a few seconds can go in that trade. Among all these, I'd actually prefer Fox just because I think he's the best player. And I think from a talent perspective, like LA wanted that Kyrie next to LeBron as like Kyrie or Trey as like even DeJounte as like that third all-star level ball handler. I think Fox, I think there's a pretty decent size gap between Fox and BI. Now, could you argue that with the draft capital and maybe if Fox, if it's going to have to be something like Austin and Max or Austin and Dalton or whatever, then I start to kind of change my tune a little bit. If it's going to be like Austin, Dalton, 2 picks, a swap or whatever, like it's starting to get a little maybe too much for me, especially when the Lakers do clearly need some wing help in size. Then I probably, I mean, I would say if you get DFS and Cam Johnson both, I really like the kind of yin and yang, like offense defense combination there, and adding just some more size, shooting, toughness, etc. So I might prefer those two to BI. If it's just one, you could maybe talk me into BI. And again, I'm not saying, like, to be clear, I'm not saying BI is worse than those guys. I'm just saying the fit and the collective value of like probably a first for those guys and maybe a first for BI as well. But I just kind of like the fit a little bit more. But again, BI is growing on me, and especially if you don't have to give up a first or maybe a protected first, whatever, as you say in the rest of your question. And last one from Eeg. Thank you for the super chat. Favorite arenas for in-game music vibe. Been to a ton, and Denver is super EDM. Hate. New York and LA is great. Miami is very Latin. Do you notice how preferences will reiterate how brutal Denver is? Yeah, Denver is brutal. Also a lot of rock. I'm not a big rock guy. If you're used to be, actually used to really, I guess I still like classic rock, but in general, more of a rap, hip hop, R&B guy. I think you hit it the nail on the head there with like New York and LA are in general probably the most my vibe. I do like Miami. I would also throw in Atlanta. I think Atlanta plays a lot of rap, and they'll often have Quavo or 2 Chainz or Lil Yachty, whoever, like Lil Baby at the game, and I think like there's just a certain vibe there. Off the top of my head, that would be it. I feel like, I mean, New York is a classic with MSG and just like the chords that they play when they're on defense, and MSG's just got a great. I think Barclays is solid too. I will say Barclays is solid. They play a lot of rap and a lot of the New York rappers. So I would say it's kind of the cities you would expect. I'm trying to think if there's a big. I think Detroit's good. Actually, I'll say Detroit was playing a lot of Drake, so I will give Detroit a special shout out. Toronto, of course, also for me as a Drake fan. But in general, I prefer arenas that play more rap. So I would also note Detroit and Toronto as two that typically play more rap. But now, with all that said, I will wrap here. I appreciate you all so much for watching and listening. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas to those who celebrate. And I'll be back. I'm actually not going to the game on Christmas. It's the first Christmas game I've missed in maybe a decade. I guess the COVID, whatever. But outside of that, it's the first Christmas game I've missed in a while. But I still will be watching, covering it, going live after. It'll probably be a bit of a shorter live, 45 to an hour. It's my wife's birthday. My son is in town, so I gotta keep it brief. But I will talk to you all then, and then I'll be back with an episode of Buha's Block on Friday to wrap up the week. But thank you all again so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, like this video. If you made it this far and have not liked it, please consider doing so, and drop a comment. There's a lot of super chats tonight. If I didn't get to one of your questions, please drop it in the comments and I will do my best to respond, or we'll be doing a mailbag coming up shortly. So prepare it for that. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the late night gang. It is almost 1 a.m. Pacific time and a bunch of different times all over the time zones that you guys are watching from. I appreciate you all so much. Again, happy holidays, Merry Christmas Eve, Merry Christmas to those who celebrate. If you celebrate and something else, happy holidays to whatever you celebrate. And hope you get some time with family, with friends. Stay blessed, and I will talk to you very soon.